In today's installment, we're going to be taking a look at pieces of missing media that were either misleading or completely fake in their existence, involving an unsettling deleted scene with Squidward, Whovians being misled on a lost episode of their favourite show, Donkey Kong overcoming arachnophobia, and a classic British children's show that maybe the characters should have washed their mouths before the cameras had started rolling. And don't forget to subscribe to enjoy more videos just like this one. Okay, with the context out of the way, let's press play. When it was released, Aladdin was the highest grossing animated movie made thus far, as it made well over $200 million domestically at the US, but then worldwide grossed about $500 million, making it the highest grossing movie of 1992. So for the next 4 years, Disney exploited Aladdin as a film series, such as an animated series that ran for 86 episodes. To give some anticipation for the show, it was planned that the introduction would be done as a pilot movie, named The Return of Jafar, although it was eventually decided to release the film directly to home media, and treat it as an official continuation of the Aladdin movie. This would begin a trend for Disney animation, where from the early 90s to the late 2000s, they would create sequels to that animation lineup and release them direct to home media. Due to Return of Jafar being promoted as a direct continuation, viewers alike certainly had a lot of high expectations that it was going to meet the same match as the theatrical release film. Long story short, it didn't, as it was critically panned, criticised for its story and animation, although to be fair, it certainly was a very ambitious task of trying to match the same style theatrical animation for a TV budget. And to be fair, when you view it in the TV market of the time, it ain't half bad, but then lining it up to the cinema release of Aladdin, not so much. In any case, for what it was certainly a television show that stood out from the competition, as it was generally well received and fondly remembered of those who grew up watching it. Sadly, it's not featured much exposure after its initial run, while several episodes didn't make it to VHS. But as for DVD, there were 3 episodes that were released as part of Jasmine's Enchanted Tales, and it's one of the very few Disney afternoon shows that's not available on Disney+. Although uniquely you can purchase the series on Amazon Prime Germany. Either way, there's no official way you can watch the original English version outside of unofficial uploads of Disney Toons reruns. The show widely expanded the world of Aladdin, introducing new friends and foes. Mohsin Raf was the second most recurring villain on the show, making a grand total of 9 appearances just behind Abismal. Mohsin Raf was a young equivalent of Jafar, an evil sorcerer, who had the aspiration of taking over several kingdoms during the series. Diago even refers to him in his debut episode as Jafar Jr. It was a popular headcanon amongst fans of the show that Mohsin Raf may be related to Jafar, but also many had noted on how similar that Mohsin Raf and Aladdin looked alike. In the early 2000s on the internet, that a story was circulating that Mohsin Raf was meant to be in the third Aladdin movie, and that it would have been revealed that Mohsin Raf was actually Aladdin's brother. This was dropped in favour for focusing on Aladdin's father, and for years on, any more behind the scenes info on the third Aladdin movie was sparse at best. Although in 2017, director of Aladdin and the King of Thieves, Tad Stearns on Twitter clarified that Mohsin Raf was never intended to be in the third Aladdin film, and that there is no basis of truth with the facts. So there's no lost script or animatic of Mohsin Raf in the third Aladdin feature. Originally broadcast on October 28th of 1999 was the SpongeBob segment I Was a Teenage Gary, with the title being a self-parody of the 80s comedy I Was a Teenage Werewolf. The plot comes to its climax with SpongeBob getting injected with some snail medicine. By consequence, SpongeBob is transformed into a snail-like creature. The same fate happens to Squidward by the end, although throughout the 2010s there was a popular internet story circulating that we would have originally seen Squidward transform into a snail, and that this was only ever shown on the episode's first broadcast, with later reshowings and home media releases not including this additional deleted scene. Fans had noted that in the shot where the deleted scene would have shortly taken place, that there is a wipe transition to the next shot. An unconventional transition for the show, as SpongeBob typically uses the bubble effects for when SpongeBob needs such a fade. It was suggested that the Polish dub of the episode still may retain this sequence, as allegedly the Polish versions of the episodes of SpongeBob are the least altered and edited. However, when it was checked, there were no additional scenes in the Polish version. It wouldn't be until by 2017 that a YouTube channel by the name of Nicktoons Network uploaded snippets of a VHS recording of the original broadcast of I Was a Teenage Gary, and assessing the footage, the alleged deleted scene is not there. Thus, we can finally conclude that the scene never existed to begin with. TV Awful was a UK comedy show that aired on Channel 4, with Victor Lewis Smith as the presenter and co-writer of the show. The programme mainly comprised of archived material, featuring clips that you wouldn't have wanted shown in front of your grandma. It ran for just under a year, producing 7 episodes. But it was most notorious for featuring a clip of Rainbow. The show, for those who are unaware, can best be described as the British equivalent of Sesame Street. And while no episodes have been produced of Rainbow for over 30 years, the series has still maintained its popularity in the UK, easily being one of the best loved children's shows of the country. So it was certainly quite surprising for those who were tuning in to TV Awful, seeing the cast of Rainbow making some rather unsubtle innuendos.
Yesterday we played with our balls, didn't we?
Yes, and we could play with our twangers as well.
Have you seen Bungle's twanger?
I've only got a tiny twanger.
By the dawn of the internet, the video very quickly became widespread, becoming quite a popular email attachment. Being shared so frequently and out of context, people wondered on a programme that was so innocent that how could something that featured the official cast and characters saying stuff that is, well, so profound? There are many stories and rumours of the circumstances that this episode originated from. The one that I was accustomed to the most growing up was that it was just a regular episode of Rainbow that was pulled from rotation and broadcast due to the unsubtle lines, making it a lost episode from the series. I also recalled a story that the version that was on the internet was actually an edited version, purposely editing the clips out of context to make the dirty humour easily more noticeable. But the clip actually originates from a 1979 Christmas tape by Thames Television. You see, during the 70s and 80s, it was quite popular for British TV companies to make a compilation of outtakes and clips of that year's TV programmes to hand out to work colleagues during the Christmas season. These tapes would as well feature original content from TV show settings featuring the cast that are doing things very out of character.
Come on, just a quick feel of your tips.
Such like, well, the Rainbow clip. So despite the rumours, it was never intended to be broadcast. Still though, it's a funny and surreal gem we have of this clip. On a side note, Rainbow yet again did a very naughty clip for the Christmas party tapes. In 1984, the characters, Zippy and George, appeared alongside host Jim Davidson on a variety show, where Tommy Boyd asked the both of them a question about Adam and Eve, resulting in this gem of a line.
What did Eve say to Adam in the Garden of Eden?
Ooh, that's a stiff one.
Stiff one.
You know, it's a bit of an easy critique saying that kid shows aren't what they used to be. I mean, it might be true to some degree, but doesn't really say a whole lot. But if there's one thing I wish that we still had from the vintage age of television, is having official clips of kid characters saying, well, rather naughty things. In any case, this resolves the mystery. It's not a lost episode, it's just a mislabeled clip. Released in 1999 was American Beauty, made on a meager budget of $15 million. Worldwide, it grossed $350 million. It earned critical praise and won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. This movie marked the directorial debut of Sam Mendes, so ain't half bad for a starter. The film ends with Lester being shot and killed, revealed to be Colonel Fix to commit the murder. Although, allegedly, there was an alternative ending to the movie. It includes Lester's daughter Jane and Colonel Fix's son Ricky, standing trial for the murder of Lester Burnham. Now exactly what happened next is a little bit fuzzy. Either the teens were found guilty or they were released free. Various crew members have recalled shooting some semblance of the alternate ending, but with accounts varying from individuals. Exactly what was filmed is still very hazy, until the day that either a home media or streaming release may include the additional scenes and footage, or even more of the information being clarified by either higher members of the production or even the director. We may never know for certain. So for now, this piece of missing media is unconfirmed. In 1966, Hammer Studios, a film company in Britain, best well known for their horror titles from the 50s all the way up to the 70s, released their most expensive and successful movie to date, 1 Million Years BC, starring Raquel Welch. The movie was a remake of the 1940s Hollywood feature 1 Million Years BC. Hammer acquired the movie rights after they were unsuccessful into securing a license to make a King Kong feature. Securing the visual effects for the extinct animals that would be seen in the picture was Ray Harryhausen, using his distinctive Dynamation stop motion. Throughout his career, he was often referred to as the Dinosaur Man, due to his fondness of the extinct species. But during his professional career, if we're only mainly talking about classic dinosaurs, then Harryhausen only ever worked on 3 feature films with the terrible lizards, like 1 Million Years BC, 1956 documentary Animal World, and the 1969 feature The Valley of Gwangi. Personally, I find it more fitting to refer to Harryhausen as the Fantasy Man, given his many titles of working with fantasy creatures from ancient mythology. In any case, 1 Million Years BC wasn't Harryhausen's most fondest film, as Hammer Studios weren't used to working on a feature film at this big and expensive of a scale, as the higher-ups would tend to grow very impatient for when it came to the lengthy and time-consuming stop motion, creating quite a lot of friction and pressure with Harryhausen. As a result, the final animation, as seen in the feature, isn't amongst the most complex that Ray has ever produced. Due to financial concerns, some prehistoric animals were dropped during the storyboard phase, like the ancient rhino Arzaphium, for not looking dinosaur enough. A woolly mammoth was also idealised to appear in the movie, and the ancient bird Farag who in their deleted sequence would have been shown as a domesticated animal by the humans to harvest the bird's eggs. None of these scenes ever made it to the filming stage. But for decades there's been one cutscene in particular that has been surrounded in mystery as to if it was ever filmed or not. That being the original finale where the cave people are confronted by a Brontosaurus. What made this scene even more compelling than the others if it ever was filmed or not, was that there was a promotional still of the cave people alongside the long-necked dinosaur, implying that the scene must have been filmed to some degree, as a screenshot equivalent to this never shows up in the final film. The Brontosaurus does make a rather small cameo at the beginning of the film, but never appears again. In the Cinema Retro magazine, issue 45, there was an article interviewing the late John Richardson, the main lead of 1 Million Years BC, where he was inquired about the existence of the Brontosaurus scene. Richardson was certain that they filmed something similar that was seen on the promotional photo, recognising the actions he was doing and the location. However, when the Harryhausen Foundation went through the existing documents for the movie, they discovered that the scene was planned to be removed long before location filming had even begun. So the original planned finale / Brontosaurus sequence may have very well never been filmed to begin with. But what about Richardson's comment? Well, it's important to remember at the time of that interview the movie was about 50+ years old. The memory cheats. So you're probably not going to remember every fine detail of a project you were part of from half a century ago. Richardson in the interview even comments on how he was acting against nothing, that the dinosaur was added later. So the photograph as originally taken may very well represent an existing sequence that's already in the film, just from another angle. Perhaps most likely being the sequence where Tumak and his father are chasing after the Pteranodons, and then this still from the sequence was taken out of context, with the marketing team adding in the Brontosaurus. Let's remember that not everything seen in the promotional material for a classic movie ever turned up in the final product. Like for example, there's a famous 1933 image of King Kong alongside a Stegosaurus. Kong never confronts that particular dinosaur in the final film, and there's nothing on the surviving paperwork to indicate that there was such a deleted scene. In February of 2015, a thread was started on 4chan, asking users the most disturbed thing that they had seen on the dark web. From there, somebody replied describing a very unsettling anime, being about 9 ladies stuck in a bathroom, holding out hope for days that they'll eventually get out. But when they find that they may be stuck indefinitely in there, each girl, not wanting to slowly die away, decide to take their own lives. The user for some time replied to many of the inquiries about the anime, giving specific details about the look and quality and exactly what happened. The user recalled that the name of the anime was Go for a Punch, also frequently referred to as Sache Shadabakushe. It's a Japanese name, so my apologies if I mispronounced that one. Intrigue would grow on the internet for people that really wanted to seek out this anime. However, search results online with both titles revealed no real results, with all articles and reports sourcing all the way back to that original 4chan thread, and the description for the short film was unfamiliar for those who are deeply into anime, since accounts on 4chan can be anonymous, and with no other verifiable sources, it's perhaps easy and a safe educated guess to say that Go for a Punch doesn't exist. Perhaps just an elaborate story to fool some people on that thread. Although YouTube user RedCube Studio made a 4-minute short film based on this internet tall tale. So I suppose now we can say that Go for a Punch does exist to some capacity. The Spider Pit sequence is perhaps the most famous long-lost deleted scene of any motion picture. For decades, the only main sources there were that this scene did once exist is a photograph and a collection of Polaroid stills, frame by frame, showing the monsters travelling along the set, and a 1966 letter by Merian C. Cooper explaining that he removed the scene out after a preview screening, that the audience were more drawn towards the pit sequence rather than Kong and the other inhabitants of Skull Island. So in fear that the sequence may have detracted or stopped the story, it was removed out. Following decades on, rumours would persist that that original test screening resulted with the audience running and screaming out in fear on how terrifying the sequence was. However, by the turn of the century, when Ray Moulton was examining the paperwork for the original King Kong feature, he realised that there were some things that didn't add up. For example, unlike a lot of the other film sequences that ended up in the final movie, the scene of the spider pit was never placed on the filming schedule, and furthermore couldn't find any evidence of the preview screening that Cooper was referring to in the letter. Moulton further had a look at existing interviews with Cooper, discussing about his time making King Kong. A lot of the stories he told wouldn't sync up with the timeline of events, when Moulton was comparing it to the drafts and paperwork, realising that Cooper would sometimes have a habit of sensationalising his stories. Like, imagine having a grandpa fisherman telling you a story on how he caught a big fish, but to make his prize seem ever more impressive, he may exaggerate the size ever so slightly, making the fish that he caught seem much more bigger than it actually was. If not your grandpa, then I'm sure we all know that one person in our lives that may have a little bit of a habit of bending the truth. Another main source for the existence of the spider pit scene is Deline Prenette, widow of stop-motion artist Willis O'Brien, where it was his crew that supplied the effects for the King Kong feature. Miss Deline would refer to the spider pit sequence as one of the most proudest things that her husband had ever done, with many people interpreting her comment as confirmation that the spider pit sequence did indeed once exist. However, Deline never directly worked on the King Kong film. What she's relaying is from a second-hand account from her husband, and from what I could gather, she didn't as directly worked in the stop-motion industry such as Willis O'Brien, so perhaps her understanding on deleted scenes and cut sequences may be a little bit simplified when her late husband was relaying to her the stories. Like, for example, my partner, she's a nurse, but just because I'm dating her doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to know everything about, well, nursing in the medical field. So with the Spider-Pit sequence, there may be two possibilities. Either one, it only ever made it as far as test footage to see on how the sequence may have looked, which may be what Cooper could be referring to, or it was just never filmed to begin with, and a lost creepy scene made for a juicy story for Mr. Cooper. 1983 marked Doctor Who's 20th anniversary, with that January opening up with a new Doctor Who season. The run of episodes ended that March, but it was going to be 8 months before the next Doctor Who instalment, The Five Doctors, would be aired to commemorate the grand anniversary year. So during that time frame, Whovians would have to be content with supplementary material, like Doctor Who's magazine issue 76. That was released on the 14th of April that year. Inside there was an exciting report of a Doctor Who lost episode rediscovery in the BBC archive. Now, at this point in the show's history, it was no secret to the Doctor Who community that the show back in its black and white days was missing some episodes within the BBC archive due to annual wiping and junking of old programmes. But, according to the article, the BBC had rediscovered a completely scrapped episode of Doctor Who, starring William Hartnell, the first actor to play the Doctor. Its survival was certainly very lucky, as during that time frame, the BBC would have rarely ever spared unused footage that never made it into broadcast, as other Doctor Who episodes in the 60s that had ample amount of footage, like the storyline The Planet of Giants, was originally a 4-parter, but was edited down to just being 3 parts, cutting down and splicing in together the original edits of episode 3 and 4. And then in the Doctor Who storyline The Highlanders, the original ending featured a Scottish man, Jamie, waving the Doctor and his companions off goodbye, but it was later refilmed to have Jamie head off with the Doctor and the companions, so he could join the TARDIS team. None of these deleted scenes ever survived beyond the 60s, and were likely junked very shortly after the final edits were finalised. So it was very much a surprise for Doctor Who historians that not only a lost episode, but a scrapped one was able to survive. The title for this incomplete episode was The Phoenix Rises, and as a way to commemorate its discovery, the BBC decided that they were going to attempt to complete the episode, although this was going to be a wee bit tricky, as 8 years previously William Hartnell passed away. So how are you meant to complete an episode when your main star is no longer around to finish his scenes? Well, the BBC still had their current Doctor Who star, Peter Davison, so a plan was devised that the episode would have an A and B storyline. The A plot would be the original footage as filmed with William Hartnell, but then we would have a B plot with Peter Davison, where both the Doctor's actions would lead to the resolution of the storyline, without either one of them knowing about the other's influence. And to make the new footage with Peter Davison fit alongside seamlessly, it would all be filmed in black and white. The magazine concludes by saying that filming will commence on that year's 1st of April, aka it was all an April Fool's stunt. But hey, if there was any small consolation that year, the year of 1983 did mark the return of several lost Doctor Who episodes, such as episode 1 of Invasion of the Dinosaurs, the final missing Pertwee episode, and then the rediscovery of 2 episodes of the William Hartnell serial Dalek's Master Plan. So, you know, a small win I suppose.